very welcome to the continuation of what proved to be a very insightful series of webinars that the LOETB hosted over the past couple of months. It was titled Future Proof Your Business. We had a fantastic response to them. The format that was devised in terms of a keynote speaker followed up by a local case study has proved really successful as well. And based on the feedback from you and from many people who checked in on the recordings of the webinars, they asked about continuing the series. So the team at LOETB have continued and they've set up a lovely program over the coming months. We're looking at one a month as opposed to weekly series, just to bring you that key information for your business and for your career and everything else in between. So definitely keep an eye out on the LOETB websites and on LinkedIn, on the various social media channels. Today, our topic is resilience and coping strategies for business. And really, is there a more topical or a more applicable topic that they could have picked for the November webinar? I think resilience, many people over the past number of months, and maybe even now, as we're kind of somewhat in that middle ground of what's going to happen next. Are we going to stay in lockdown and restricted? Are we going to reopen up? What might Christmas look like? What does the future look like for business? I'd say many people, we're all trying to find our own definition of what resilience is and what it means to us. It can be very different for everybody, I would imagine. So I'm really looking forward personally today to seeing, the people like Dr. Orla Byrne talk about resilience and particularly coping strategies for us all. Our keynote speaker today is Dr. Orla Byrne. She's a lecturer in entrepreneurship and strategy, and Orla would bring her expertise to the floor. Our case study will be by Anita Murray. She's the managing director of the Salon Spa Company and a co-founder of the Irish Spa Association. So again, good keynote speakers going to bring you up to date, current on what's actually happening out there. And again, to give us that idea of what resilience means for us, both personally and for our business. To kick off proceedings today, Pádraig Boland from the local enterprise, from the LOETB, is going to give a quick update again on the amazing services that the LOETB offer and how your business or how your team members or even family members can benefit from the range of programs and that are available to you there. So at around 1:10, we're going to invite Dr. Orla Byrne to give her keynote speech. Anybody that has question answers, we'll invite you to use the Q&A function. You'll see it at the bottom of your screen. Please put your questions into that. We will then put the questions to the speakers after the end of their presentation. At around 1:25, Anita will join us then to give her case study for about 10 or 12 minutes. Again, we can take questions for Anita after that. And towards the end then, given if time permits, we'll have a little bit of space there to pose questions to both panelists or indeed for people of the LOETB, whatever you feel is appropriate. So I think without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Pádraig Boland from the LOETB. Just give us an update on the latest and all that's what's happening with the LOETB. Pádraig, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Ronan. Thanks very much. And I just want, on behalf of Laois the Education and Training Board, to welcome all of you to today's webinar. And Ronan has introduced where we're at and where we've come from. I suppose LOETB has the statutory responsibility for education and training provision in both counties. And we go from community education and training, where I suppose the primary focus is on engaging people whose educational journey maybe ended prematurely at an early stage, or maybe got off to a false start. And we go from that community education engagement focus right through to looking at people with apprenticeship at level 6s, and also, I suppose, interventions that would help people to go on to third level, etc. The team that I lead is the skills team, and our focus is, I suppose, a dual focus on identifying current skills gaps in local, regional, and sometimes national economy, and developing in partnership with employers and the industry sectors programs, bespoke programs that provide those absent or latent skills in those areas. We've also been focusing lately on future skills. I suppose we're heavily involved in the just transition process happening in the Midlands at the moment I suppose in response to Bord Mona's transition from brown to green and all that means for the communities within our remit. And everywhere we go really, whether we go to look at the SOLAS-FET strategy, the national strategy for further education and training, whether we talk about future jobs in the government's policies around future jobs, even if we look at the European Green Deal, we are being told time and time again that the future is about transitions. And it's in particularly about transitions to a green economy, a circular economy, and the digital transition that we are, and this is part of this webinar series, to support our enterprises to face the future with confidence. One of the things I suppose that any transition brings, and by definition, is change. And the fear of the unknown is something that we all face. And certainly in a year where COVID and Brexit is fast approaching, the unknown is probably the one known is the unknown. And that brings fear. And with fear, the one way to face fear is resilience and coping strategies. So today is so relevant to us all. I want to welcome Orla Byrne. I had a preview of Orla on YouTube during the week and her research. I was particularly impressed with some research she did on not so much business success, but the lack of success and how people cope with that in business. And every entrepreneur knows that you're likely to have as much lack of success as success. And I particularly welcome a lady from my own neck of the woods, Anita Murray. I can't claim to know Anita very well. I am of a generation that knows Billy and Lily, her parents, better than Anita. But both of them have a background in retail and in customer service that is second to none. And Anita, very proud day for me to have a Verband person on telling their story. So, Ronan, that's where we're at. We have a very strong team. At the end of the webinar, Jolene will just put up a slide for contact details at LOETB. We do provide bespoke training. So please, don't be afraid to ask, and we'll try and answer as best we can.
Excellent. Well said, Pádraig. I think as well, you've mentioned Brexit there, you mentioned COVID, and particularly around the Midlands, we can add other factors in there, particularly the closure of the power stations and stuff. It throws up a lot of those high level questions for us and for people in the region too. So without further ado, let's delve into those resilience and coping strategies. Delighted to be joined by our keynote, Dr. Orla Byrne. Orla teaches entrepreneurship modules on the MBA and MSc programs at Smurfit School of Business and on the undergraduate BComm and associated programs at Quinn School of Business. She's previously taught entrepreneurship on graduate and undergraduate programs at University of Strathclyde Business School, University of Bath School of Management, and formerly at the Institute of Art, Design and Technology, and much more. You've probably seen more of her introduction there on the opening slide. So I would now like to introduce our first speaker and hand you over to Orla Byrne. Orla, you're very welcome.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ronan, and thank you, Pádraig, and everybody at LOETB as well. It's an honor to be here today, and I'm very grateful to Anthony for the invitation to talk. So let me just share my screen. There's always that moment, isn't there? It's like, is it going to work? No matter how often we're on Zoom, it's still the same. So let me see, are we here? There we go.
Yeah, we can see your screen, Orla. Yeah, perfect.
Excellent. So thanks very much. So today, I'm going to just talk about my own experience of researching these topics. It goes back about 10 years at this stage. And as Pádraig mentioned, I have spent a lot of time looking at business failure as well. So the concepts, the topics that you mentioned, indeed, Brexit, previous recession, what's happening now, have all inspired and driven me to start a study looking at resilience and entrepreneurship during the pandemic. So the presentation today is stemming from research over the last number of years and my experience with the project so far on resilience during the pandemic. Okay, so first of all, looking at resilience, the word is used a lot. Okay, the term is used a lot, and it's not always clear exactly what it is. I mean, is it a trait? Is it something fixed? Is it something psychological? Is it a behavior? Is it a way of being? Is it something that we're born with? Is it something that can be taught? And how we view resilience really will influence how resilient we are in many ways as well, and how we respond to different situations. So really trying to understand what we're talking about when we use the term is important. Resilience is also used a lot in association with other terms that we hear, kind of all relating to the same thing. So perseverance and grit. And we kind of hear this about entrepreneurs, that they show you have to be, it's 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration, and all this kind of thing. So we see perseverance and grit and resilience all being associated in some sort of way. Grit is an interesting one, so I'm going to just look at that in a little bit more detail. So hard work, diligence, finishing what has begun, and perseverance towards long-term goals. So that's actually what the meaning behind grit is. And this has kind of crept into the vernacular when we're talking about and describing entrepreneurs. There's that it makes sense, okay? And I'm sure we've got many business owners online who are relating to that. The bit that kind of strikes me is this last point, perseverance towards long-term goals. And so I want to kind of look at that in a little bit more detail. So we can have long-term goals, yeah, absolutely. And strategy is hugely important when in business, but in startup world, it's important as well. But everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, okay? And there's been no bigger punch in the mouth than a global pandemic and what is presented to business owners in this year. So I'm going to look a little bit about that relationship between how we view goals and what happens when our goals are a little bit derailed, okay? So the difference, this is one of the challenges with grit, is that we have this focus on long-term goals. Resilience, therefore, is a little bit different, okay? So here's a nice definition of resilience. It's the ability to bounce back from negative emotional experiences and setbacks and flexibly adapt to the changing demands of stressful experiences. So something to note about that is resilience doesn't necessarily have this focus on an end game. It's more dealing with the here and now. And the term I like the most within this is this concept of flexibly adapting. So the next question is, how do we actually do this? How do we flexibly adapt? Because if you can kind of understand that, then we can get to the crux of how we can build our own resilience and observe even sometimes our own resilience as well. So coping is a strong way in which we can understand how we adapt to situations. And coping comes in two main forms, really. We have, or this is, sorry, how we define it, is a response to a negative perception of your environmental stimuli that threaten us or our ventures. So if we feel threatened, what's our response to that? That's what our coping is. And there's two main ways that we can look at coping. And this isn't new news. This isn't new research. It's been around for a long time, but there's still the terms that are used to mostly, for the most part, to describe how we actually cope. So we have problem-focused coping and we have emotion-focused coping. So to just understand this a little bit more, what are we talking about when we talk about problem-focused coping? Well, when you can't change the direction of the wind, adjust your sails. Okay, so that's very strong saying. There's no point in crying over spilled milk. Just get up, try and figure out what you can do, respond and react to that, okay? Then you have, my coping skills include coffee drinking, inappropriate humor, and looking stuff up on the internet. This is how I get through like 90% of life, okay? So we've got very, very different coping mechanisms here, and that's your emotion-focused coping kind of, and avoidance as well, sneaking in there too. So we've got these two extreme responses we can show once we feel some kind of threat to ourselves or our ventures. So what is our response? What's the best coping style that we can adapt? Which one is best? Well, the research would say that it's not a case of one approach being better or worse than the other. It's about some kind of a balance between them. And that how we respond to these challenges will be influenced by what the situational demands and constraints are at that particular time. It can also be influenced by what our individual subjective preferences are. Entrepreneurship is such a demanding career choice. I don't think anybody gets into it without doing a lot of soul searching and really understanding what it is that motivates them and drives them, why you are doing it, why you're not simply a PAYE, why you're taking on all this additional risk. So you don't just start a business lightly. And there's, so I imagine for most people, we have a good, or most entrepreneurs have some good understanding of their own subjective preferences and their own comfort zones in terms of how they respond to different challenges and threats. So therefore, our coping style can be part of our own preferences, maybe more so than what could be, let me see how, I don't want to say the best for the situation, but we definitely can have a bias in terms of how we respond to things. So that can be part of our comfort zone a little bit as well. But the research would suggest that there's definitely value in both, and oscillating or balancing between the two. There's space for both, essentially, is what the work would suggest, okay? Now, with coping styles, so what's your instinct with regards to business owners? Which do you think that they tend to veer towards, more problem-focused coping or more emotion-focused coping? As I said, you know yourselves so well at this stage, you've probably all been able to answer this. So problem-focused coping is the answer. So most entrepreneurs tend to be very comfortable in the problem-focused coping space, where they will immediately, they'll start to problem solve very quickly. And it's not surprising, I suppose, that that's the way their brain works, because in order to come up with business ideas in the first place, you've had to kind of identify problems and come up with solutions. And that's been perhaps the motivation behind starting your business in the first place as well, that you saw these problems that weren't being addressed. So this problem-focused coping is a very natural comfort zone. And what's positive about this is that we see entrepreneurs being hugely positive and satisfied with their work that they do. So despite the risk, despite the exposure, despite the debt, despite the pressures and the responsibilities to staff, etc., they tend to thrive. You, the audience, you tend to thrive in this space as well and very much enjoy it. So that it's good to know that this kind of positive optimism stems from your coping strategies as well. So just to tease out what the problem-focused coping strategies look like a little bit more. So when you're faced with this threat, how do you perceive a problem? How do we change what direction we're going in this boat? How do we change our sails? So we can first of all think about how we perceive the problem. Then we can think about the situation, and then we can look at the long-term goal again, okay? So with the problem, it's about adapting your long-term broader view of the situation as well. So sometimes taking that longer term perspective, this is a problem now, how will this pan out in the future, etc., can just lift your mindset out of it. And what these kind of elements are about is reframing how we view a situation or a problem, trying to look at the positives of the threat, or trying to see things from different angles as well. Changing the actual situation in terms of stepping up performance. So it can mean intensifying the work that you're actually doing to try to erode the situation, and in prioritizing efforts and getting help as well. So the problem could be that it's you and your problem. And sometimes just by sharing the problem, by reaching out, by contacting LOETB or whatever networks, agencies you're part of, you can definitely start to dissolve that problem, but also you can start to delegate and get a little bit more insight into what we're doing as well. So seeking help is a very healthy form of coping as well. And then another way of addressing this, another problem-focused coping strategy would be to look at the long-term goal. So I'm going to look at this again. I know I mentioned it before, but it warrants a little bit of an explanation, I think, okay? So the challenge that we had with GRIT was that when we look to the long term, and when we have a goal in mind, that there is a gap between where we are now with our current situation and what that goal, future-oriented goal situation looks like. And that's what we call this goal discrepancy. So when we have a goal discrepancy, it can lead the behavior in terms of a positive way. It can motivate us to try to minimize that discrepancy, to try address that gap. And as I said, entrepreneurs have very strong sense of confidence in their own skills and abilities. They're very positive. They're comfortable in kind of problem situations, and that there's a strong belief that you can fix what you're doing as well. And there's another way of reframing it is thinking, well, whatever you're doing now, if it's challenging, etc., at least you know you're going to be able to draw on this experience sometime in the future. So you know what you're doing is not a waste of time or energy, whatever way you are, because you know if you can keep that in mind, that this is something that will be useful in the future, then that is that's a way of justifying what you're going through. However, keeping a focus on long-term goals can also be problematic. And where I have seen this mostly is actually with my research on business failures. So speaking to entrepreneurs who have been through failure experiences can see that in particular during the decline of a business, having a strong attachment to an end image can be detrimental in terms of this negative feedback cycle. So you're not reaching the goal, you're not where you thought you were, and it's kind of reinforcing a negativity around the situation that you're currently in. Sometimes an attachment to an idea or a goal can be so strong that it can shroud our judgment. And we can become obsessive and a little bit blind in and misdirected in trying to pursue something that might be a little bit, that we might, our current situation might not align us in a positive way to achieve that. It can limit our creative problem solving. If we have something fixed in our heads, we're not open to alternatives and exploring those options. And so when we're in this frame of mind, we can become quite rigid, and we don't have the flexibility that's required for innovation. We don't have the space for creativity that's required for innovation. And definitely by not speaking to people about when you feel a little bit stuck in the gap, this kind of goal discrepancy, this gap that you're experiencing, we can remain stuck here. And this is what I've seen with research and business failure, that this period can be very, very difficult for entrepreneurs, and it's very difficult to get out of it. Okay, so there's some dark sides or downsides to some of these approaches as well. But this is where resilience comes in as a nice kind of fresh perspective to try and reframe your thinking about, so grit can get you down a little bit of a wormhole if there's that focus on problem-focused coping and also on this end goal. But with resilience, remember, we're talking about this flexible adaptation as well. So it takes the emphasis off the end point and really focuses on where you are at the current point and trying to see what you can do within the resources that are available to you at this moment in time. Okay, so again, thinking about this, which is best, problem-focused coping or emotion-focused coping? We didn't really speak about emotion-focused coping very much, but this is really where you take time to deal with and process the emotions that you're feeling at a moment in time. And entrepreneurs, business owners, incredibly busy people. So quite often you're so committed to everybody else, your employees, your investors, your family, trying to keep all the show on the road for everyone else. Quite often it's you as a person that might miss out on a bit of time. So it's emotion-focused coping has a space, an important role in all of this as well, that you're allowing yourself some time to recognize some of the pressures that you're under, and some of the stresses and strains that you may be feeling, or some of the discomfort that you might find yourself in as a result of everything that's been happening. Okay, having this break away from allowing yourself to some people say it as indulge, but allowing yourself to have that kind of space to feel what you're feeling, you can come back in a different, renewed vision or perspective. And that's what's important then for having that, allowing that kind of creativity and creating that cognitive space in your head to see your problems a little bit differently and try to find more creative solutions to them as well. So all of this, I mentioned I'd started a study. So with colleagues from UCD, we've been looking at how entrepreneurs are coping with everything that's been happening during the pandemic. There's a 3-part study, and the first part's the survey, there's interviews, and then diary follow-ups for some people. We're still collecting the data, so I don't have a huge amount to share from it. What I can talk about are the early findings that I'm seeing from the people that I've been speaking to. And what I tend to see is that people who are getting through this have revised their end goals. They've had to do that at a very early stage, usually from March, sometimes even back before that in January. People saw what was happening in China and started to think, what's the worst case scenario for our business? How could this impact us? We need to act now. What can we do? And it meant making really, really tough decisions early in the process. So the tougher the decisions, the tighter the scaling back, the more proactive people were. It tended to give some sense of empowerment to people, and where, like what Padraig and Ronan were saying, like, we have no control at the moment. There's so much outside of our control. Even Christmas is outside of our control. Making decisions empowers you and gives you some sort of sense of control over a very complex and uncertain environment, and it allows for agility. So for many people, say the government support has been good in terms of wage subsidies. So that meant that they were able to maybe carry over a certain hump of their business and then see how things are. And maybe some parts of their business they had to kind of kill off, and other parts of their business they found were actually able to do well. But it meant making the tough decisions early. Now, with that in mind, those people weren't able to make those decisions. And, you know, I'm speaking to an audience of business owners as well. It's about having some kind of preparation for this. And this is where you're kind of thinking about flexible and adaptation can come into it. So if you are already poised to be flexible and to be vulnerable and to be a little bit more agile in your thinking and prepared to respond and less connected to longer term goals, then you had that dexterity that you could respond to some of the challenges and make those decisions. Previous experiences have been important. So people have said, I've heard a lot of people refer to previous business failures that were horrendous at the time, or, you know, that they got through, that they've come out of. And then when this happened, they were saying, well, listen, I've already been through some terrible stuff, but I'm actually okay now because I didn't want to end up in that situation again, which reinforces the fact that even when you're in a difficult, challenging experience, that you can reframe it and store it as a positive experience for the future as well. So it really reinforces that entrepreneurial learning. And then another element that was important was the previous trading experience. So it was what I'm finding, it's been a particularly harsh time for people at very early stages of the new venture creation process, where they don't have the trading record to just kill off different incomes or functions. So it's very difficult to get something off the ground now, is what I'm finding as well. But it brings me back to resilience. So what does all of this mean? Is it a trait? Is it a fixed trait? Is it behavior? Or what is it? So I definitely think that it's something that we can all, if we're aware of it, we can start to bank experiences, thoughts, as, oh, okay, this is something I'm doing to improve my flexibility or how I'm adapting, etc. And it just might help when we're developing strategies for the future as well, that we place equal emphasis on how responsive we can be to challenges as they arise, and allow a little bit of slack in our strategizing for the future as well. So it can create more opportunities maybe for innovation or creative responses when things happen. So therefore, yeah, the resilience of firms and people, it's not static, it's continuously evolving and determined by the dynamic choices of appropriate strategies consistent with the context at the time. So that's the study. Again, I'll put up a link and share the slides if people would like. And that's my email if anyone would like to send me anything. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Orla. One thing that struck me there listening to you is like we talk about a subject such as resilience, but yet we hear words like creative, dynamic, change direction, you know, stimulus, looking at area, you know, that area of choice between stimulus and response. You know, it's great to hear such positive language around maybe a term that we possibly treat negatively in terms of resilience, but actually. So first question we're going to put to you is a bit of a classic debate about leadership. Are leaders born or made? Are people kind of naturally pre-wired to be resilient, or is it something that we learn, you know, based on people that we grow up with, our mentors, etc.? What's the current view on that?
Well, the latter, completely, entirely, and even the concept of our entrepreneurs born or made. The research shows time and time again that we can develop processes. We can develop competencies, we can develop mindsets, we can develop behaviors, skills, etc. So we can learn a lot of these. So some people might have an innate talent for it. I always think it's like English literature, you know, so our award-winning novelists born, or have they worked hard on their writing? You know, so some people will have an incredible gift, natural gift of writing, but other people can learn that skill and be equally successful as well. So I think it's definitely it's something we can train ourselves in, and we, as I said, it's about being aware. So as we're developing our strategies, that we just stop and think, if something was to happen, where have I slack in this? How can I manage this? Or if you're in a situation that's particularly challenging, you're thinking, well, how attached am I focused on my end goal? What elements of my end goal can I pause? Can I park to the side? How can I revise where I am at the moment? How can I revise my resources that are available to me? And what decisions can I make now that are going to empower me and give me some control? So all of that is stuff that we can all practice. We don't necessarily need to be born with them.
Yeah, because one attendee has asked a question: does resilience, does it grow, or does it get better with age? So I guess it's a bit like emotional intelligence. You can develop it, unlike maybe say your IQ.
Yeah.
That's fair to say then that, yeah, we can, I suppose life maybe helps that as well, but we can grow more resilient then as we grow older.
And that experience is actually critical. So that's what I find really great from the study, is meeting so many people who said, we've been to the wall before, we've gotten, we're able to apply some of that here. We know what it's like. We didn't want to end up in that same situation again. So being able to carry over learning from one experience to the next absolutely enforces the message that it can be learned.
And given the year that businesses have had, 2020, not much more needs to be said about it. Then we need to look at, so if you're a business owner, you have to have your own personal resilience, but you also need the business resilience. They could be two very different things.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, we talk about different hats, the bonus hats, but we talk about micro identities in entrepreneurship research as well. So I'm a lecturer, I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm a wife, I'm all of these different things, and entrepreneurs are the same as well. And sometimes our roles can be very different in our business versus who we are at home as well. But that's why I think it's important to remember the two sides of coping, that whichever we're doing, that we're at least nurturing ourselves in some way as well. And the emotion focused side of things can be kind of brushed under the carpet a little bit as seen as being weak, or, the emotional stuff, or, things people don't see as being strong characteristics for success in business. But actually, if we can recognize and deal with emotions, they can really create a lot more space in our heads by just giving them a little bit of space, give them a bit of airtime. So resilience can look different, and the dynamic that you can have in your home can be slightly different of what you'd have in your business. So I would agree with that, yeah.
Except, of course, when home becomes work and work becomes home, as it has been this year as well. And I suppose a final question for you too, around, if we look at a business's resilience, you can look at your contingency planning, you can look at the financials, you can pretty much put a rating on that. When it comes to testing our own personal resilience, we're looking for more, I'd imagine, than just, somebody saying, oh, he or she's a great one, they can keep going when the chips are down. But it's not just about putting the shoulder to the wheel, it's about remaining inquisitive, creative and all that. How could someone go about just getting a kind of a quick, maybe spot check of how resilient they are at a point in time?
I have a friend who lectures with me, and he lectures on negotiations, and he runs. So he applies his concept of running to everything he does in his life. So he's constantly driven by a pursuit of his personal best. So every lecture he goes into, he says, I want to do my personal best in this class. Every time he goes out for a run, he says, I want to do my personal best for the run today. So it's quite a determined mindset. I don't apply that as rigidly myself, but I like that concept because it means that we can all try to, we're trying to revise what we're doing and see how we can improve it. So it's Kaizen, it's continuous improvement in what we're doing to try and improve our overall performance, personally and professionally as well.
And underpinned by clear kind of strategy and goals that are set out as well, if you're going to bring your best to each occasion. But Orla, thank you so much for your input so far. To all our attendees as well, please continue to put all your questions into the Q&A, and we'll have time at the end as well to put more questions back to Orla and to Anita as well. So I'd now like to introduce our next speaker. What has really worked very well for us on this series is having a case study, and as someone said, a local case study always really brings us to the fore as well. So I'd like to introduce Anita. She's the founder at Pink Dundrum and MD at the Salon and Spa Company. She's a successful award-winning entrepreneur and has grown her business year on year and adapted to the ever-changing business environment. So Anita, you're very welcome to this webinar, and we're very much looking forward to hearing about your journey so far. Sorry, Anita, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry about
Perfect.
that.
Have you now?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the warm welcome. I'm the Managing Director at the Salon and Spa Company and co-founder of the Irish Spa Association. I established my own company in 2008, right at the beginning of the last recession. So it was a turbulent startup, but 12 years on, we have 70,000 clients, and our distribution distributes 8 world-leading brands from the UK and the US and as far away as Tasmania. Our flagship salon and spa is in Dundrum Town Centre, and last year Edvard and Pink was awarded the Best Beauty Salon in Europe and Best Day Spa in Europe at the World Luxury Spa Awards in St. Petersburg. So it's been an exciting few years. I've always credited my interest in business to my parents and, mind you, my grandparents. My grandmother opened her own business in 1954. So I can't imagine business was easy back then, especially for an entrepreneur without all the supports we often take for granted today. But she was a great businesswoman, extremely caring, hardworking, resilient, very customer focused, and qualities she passed on to my parents and qualities that inspire me. Fast forward to 2020, and it's been a year of it. And so much has changed from when my grandmother set out in business in 1954. And at the same time, I think nothing at all has changed when it comes to resilience and coping strategies in business. So how do we lead in a crisis? How do we navigate difficult times? And often when everyone else is contracting and scared, I believe the very nature of life is change, and business and entrepreneurship is change. And I think what we need to understand is how to navigate that change ourselves. When life sends us change, those who are agile and those who adapt to survive and thrive amidst the change are the ones that will endure over the long term. And I think those who don't, then, if you don't allow your business to adapt to new ways, if you cling to the past, suffering from the old head in the sand situation and wishing things were the same, that's unfortunately when you're going to find it difficult to keep things on the steady. Businesses that see new things coming and new conditions and ask questions like, how do I add more value? What's the opportunity here? What's the opportunity to become better, to build a better business, to be a better person, and to serve more people? And I think those are the companies that will not just survive, but will really win in difficult times. And that's where I'm trying to live with my business right now. I think every adversity carries with it or brings with it the seeds of a greater or equivalent opportunity. And I think that's really important. And I think we always need to tell ourselves that every adversity can bring opportunity. An example would be where we've had to take our own business model and reimagine our whole offering and explore and understand what our communities need right now. How can we be of better service? How can we support our community? For example, we now offer virtual well-being services. We do a great deal of corporate gifting, care parcels, and more than ever, we need to be focused on how we can become a turnaround artist of sorts. I read a quote recently and I thought it was really relevant to where we are right now. A bad day for the ego is a great day for the soul. And it's times when you're down on your knees that you grow the most. And I think if we kind of remember that when times are tough, it might make things a little bit easier. Someone that really inspired me is Nelson Mandela. My husband is South African. During some time we spent out in South Africa 10 years ago, we visited Robben Island. And we saw the quarries where he was forced to work for 7 years, and his cell, which was maybe 2 meters by 3 meters, and all he had was an old wooden blanket on the floor. He didn't even have a bed, and he just had a little wooden table where he'd write his letters. But incredibly, his colleagues out there that would have known him, they all said that it was Robben Island that made Nelson Mandela to become the peacemaker, the president of South Africa, and at a time when that country was on the brink of civil war. And we're probably all on our own version of Robben Island right now. But it's in these most challenging times that we come to understand our strength, and that's relevant to you as a manager or a business owner or an entrepreneur. And as we navigate our difficulties and the challenges coming at us and the aftershocks of this pandemic, once we harness, I think, that fear and the volatility and use the uncertainty to allow us to grow, to become wiser, to give us insights, to introduce us to our strengths. And when you turn that corner, and you will, I think that sometimes you can't see the end of this, but you're going to come out stronger than ever. And I think if we always keep that in the back of our minds, it just kind of gets you through the darker days. When I opened my first business at the beginning of the recession in 2008, a number of people said to me at the time, if you can survive this, you'll thrive in the future. And I didn't quite grasp it at the time, but as we find ourselves in the current crisis, I understand that meaning now more than ever. So I'm just going to end with a few little things that help me build a little more resilience. So everyone focuses on mindset. And I think there's so much more we need to focus on: heart set, soul set, health set. Now more than ever, you need to try and build a great relationship with yourself. And that will allow you to turn down the volume when you have those days that are a little bit tougher and those negative thoughts creep in. You need to take care of yourself in difficult times. You need to exercise more, supplement, get enough rest, get out in nature. I love going for walks in the woods or in a forest. Nature is a great healer, and there's so much research to support that now. We know that plants emit compounds called phytocides, and that's been proven to lower blood pressure, build better immunity, and so on. So I think that just focusing on ourselves, I think as Orla said earlier, that we do tend to give so much of ourselves away that, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to take care of yourself as well. Be optimistic. Staying optimistic during dark periods can be really difficult, but maintaining a hopeful outlook is an important part of resiliency. And positive thinking doesn't mean ignoring the problem in order to focus on positive outcomes. It means understanding that setbacks are transient and that you can have the skills and the abilities to combat the challenges that you face. What you're dealing with may be difficult, but it's important to remain hopeful and positive about a brighter future. And I'm sure brighter days are ahead. Thank you.
Nice to hear at the end, actually. Thank you so much, Anita, that brighter days are ahead, because yeah, it has been a challenging year for people. Thank you so much. It's fantastic to bring that story, even to bring it from, you know, from your grandmother right up to the present day, and some of the numbers you talk about there are staggering too. I loved what you said about the bad day for the ego is a good day for the soul. It's so simple, but very deep and profound, and I know it's got people thinking there as well. It is such an important topic of just trying to keep going. And yeah, like a bad day for the ego, I mean, everybody's probably had those, and maybe more so this year. Do you think, would that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think that we need to take on those days and, you know, use them as building bricks to make ourselves more resilient, and not to be afraid of that. Because when I look back at the adversity in 2008, when we didn't know what we were facing into as, you know, a young girl in my 20s going into business and taking out massive liabilities with banks. When I look back now, that's really given me the resilience today to feel a lot more capable, you know, with what we're facing throughout this pandemic.
Yeah, and interesting to see one attendee just after Orla's piece, he put up as well, like, know your numbers, it allows you to sleep at night. So also a very relevant point as a business owner. I mean, the numbers, they don't lie, and they tell the true story of what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't bury your head in the sand either and kind of use positive thinking that you have to, everything has to be calculated as well. And you need to know, you know, if there's future lockdowns, you know, or how are we going to get through that, and really start planning into the future and crunching those numbers and making sure your business is agile and well positioned to take all that on.
Are business owners becoming better at being resilient and at developing coping strategies, do you think? Is it now something we can talk about, as in on a webinar like this now, rather than being a thing of, I own a business, I have to work really hard or be seen to work hard? Are we doing better as a nation, or can we develop things even further?
Absolutely. I think we're communicating a lot more. You know, I think that we tend in the past to keep to ourselves, and we think that we're the only person suffering or struggling. And when you speak to other entrepreneurs, and, you know, when you network a little bit more and get more involved in your community, you come to that realization that, you know, we're actually all in the same place and we're all in this together. And, you know, I think that to control the controllables, and after that, then, you know, that you just have to let some things go. But I think speaking to other people and realizing, you know, we're actually all having the same struggles, and the advent of social media and Instagram and all these things would make you think that everyone else is doing fantastic. I'm the only person that's struggling, and, you know, what am I doing wrong? But everyone is struggling.
Yeah, I think actually there was on one of the slides. Sorry, Orla. Yep.
Can I add to that as well, to what Anita was just saying? You know, I think it is really important that resilience is becoming part of a narrative, but I just wouldn't like it a very narrow interpretation of that resilience to be the narrative, where we're saying we have to be hard, we have to be working harder. Resilience isn't about working harder. It's about, I think it's a bit kinder than grit, do you know? And I mean, nobody's not working hard, but it's about the kindness matched with that as well, and the opportunity, the reflective part, to see what we're doing and see where we can add in some kind of flexibility and a bit of space as well. So I think that's important, that we have a balanced view of resilience.
Yeah, we have a question in from somebody asking, for tips and guidance on how to build or develop resilience. And one thing both of you have spoken about too is that sometimes things fail, sometimes they don't work. So is it perfectly natural to try develop resilient strategies that actually don't work? So how, maybe Anita, in your own experience, what works for you? Or have you any examples of stuff that didn't work for you in the past when you tried to become more resilient or kind of up your motivation and it just didn't work for you, and how you in turn coped with that?
Yeah, I think that I always try focus on in business, anything I'm working on, I have to just really be passionate about it, and it has to be something that I would do, if it came down to it, without any remuneration. And that probably allows me then to, I think when you really enjoy what you're doing, that it sort of takes away that, that risk and that struggle, as it were. But I think that you have to be kind of comfortable with yourself as well, and comfortable with your decisions. And as Orla said, to not be so hard on yourself. And resilience is not about being, hard and tough. It's, it's about just being okay with what the outcome could be, and understanding what you're going to learn from that. But through the Spa Association, we'd work with a lot of Irish business owners, and we do see that, and it can be very tough if things don't work out, and if your business fails. And I think it's important to have family around you, to have friends around you, and people that you can talk to. And I think that it just takes a little bit of time to, I suppose, come to terms sometimes when things don't work out.
Orla, for a question for you then, like when it comes to resilience within a company or an organization, is it something that can be measured, or is it generally just the product or the outcome of a really open company culture, a very supportive culture? Like it's not just about having, say, therapeutic sessions for people. It's deeper than that.
Yeah, it's a good question, actually, Ronan. To be honest, my research focuses more on entrepreneurs and the personality or the individual level application of it. I don't look so much at larger organizations, so I'm not quite sure how resilience is measured in those contexts or those environments. I can find out. But I think from an entrepreneurship perspective, what's important is for entrepreneurs to absorb the concept and to see how that can pan out in the business. So to kind of tie it back maybe to what Yvonne was asking about tips as well. So what I've seen sometimes as being effective is doing worst case scenario planning and identifying what is the worst that could happen to your business, and to actually deal with that a little bit head on, and to try and think, how could I respond if I lost this part of my business, or if that revenue stream closed, or whatever. And then if you don't allow yourself the headspace to think about that and try to come up with solutions and alternatives, then not that worst case scenario might happen, but if something else, a smaller degree of it happens, you mightn't be as prepared. So part of resilience is being about prepared as well. So I definitely think that worst case scenario planning can be useful, because then it can influence your decision making and encourage you to make a decision in some way to try and adapt to what could potentially happen. So that empowers you. So when you feel more empowered, it's better for your mental health. You go with whatever decision you made, you have to go with. You can't be, thinking, oh, I should have done this, shoulda, woulda, coulda. But chaos can happen externally, but at least you might find that you have a little bit more control over what you're doing. And if you can do that with kind of smaller things that aren't as big a risk, then when it comes to bigger decisions with bigger implications, you might be more experienced in it.
Yeah. And again, I think it goes back to an earlier point one of the participants made of you trust the numbers as well. Use those numbers also from your business to help make that decision and inform it. And because, like you said, Orla, maybe it might be the wrong, or maybe it wasn't the best decision, but you've made it on an informed basis, which then I suppose you've less to beat yourself up with, which is no harm. But interestingly, what you've spoken about there, maybe for your organization, could translate itself into like a business continuity plan. And a lot of us, we do the same thing maybe in our personal lives. It could be just, you know, a pension, it could be healthcare. You know, you are almost planning for a worst case scenario. So again, quite an interesting kind of link between the two. If anybody wants to send more questions in, please do so. If not, we'll probably finish up the webinar in a couple of minutes. But I think maybe to finish, Anita, your hopes for 2021, I think a message for business owners, entrepreneurs who are listening. Huge amount of uncertainty facing us, like things are changing week by week. But if you had a message for business owners for the year ahead, maybe how to best plan for it, what would that message be? Sorry for putting you on the spot.
No worries. I think look after yourselves. I think that a lot of business owners I'm speaking to are very, very hard on themselves. And I think that to realize that we're all in the same position, as I said before, control the controllables, and after that you just have to let some things go, and you have to take care of yourself, you have to take care of your family. You can't pour from an empty cup. So, you know, your well-being is so important right now. We're seeing huge increases in people struggling with their mental health and anxiety, and people that think they're very resilient, and you know, that it's going to show in your health then, where you know, you're keeping yourself under a lot of stress, and it does translate to ill health. So look after yourself, you know, go for that walk. You know, if you're feeling overwhelmed, just turn off the laptop and, you know, even pour yourself a glass of wine. You just have to look after your mental health.
Good point. And I think, look, we all know Christmas, nobody knows how it's going to pan out yet, but you know, we'll know what the decision is in time, and it's just a case of just trust the deal. We have to wait for updates. We can't start planning for something that we don't know about. I think maybe it could be the perfect example to do that. We seem to have no more questions from the panelists there too. I just say personally, just like to thank both Orla Byrne and Anita for such fantastic input today as well. I think, yes, it's a subject that it is brilliant to have it front and center and for people to talk about, because certainly it has been a year that people's resilience has been tested. It could also be the year that people discover that, yes, you are a very resilient person, and you're using that to build for 2021. To you both, thank you so much for taking the time out this lunchtime to talk to us. There's more coming up in this series of webinars. The next one is on Thursday, the 17th of December at 4:30 p.m. All details will be there on the LOETB website and on the various social media channels. You'll see on screen at the minute some of the contact points for the various services that the LOETB offer, be it apprenticeship services, traineeships, the skills to advance courses, and the various people who are there to expertly lead you through those. The next topic on the 17th of December will be COVID-19 is not a disruption, but an accelerant. So kind of really building on maybe what was talked about today, that using it as that accelerant to build your business, or to have it ready for next year, or indeed to grow from there. I think at that stage we have no more further questions for the team or panelists. Thank you to everybody for joining us today. The attendance numbers are growing week on week and month by month on these, which is no surprise. I'm delighted to be asked to be part of this again. And the video of this session was recorded, just to reassure everybody. The only people who were seen on screen are the people who were talking, or the panelists. So anybody that was a participant, your image or that has to be recorded on this. So when it's shared on social media, you'll remain anonymous on it. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell everybody else you know about the series that's coming up. Keep an eye on social media. The word of mouth, the feedback is what is really helping generate the interest in these. So without further ado, I'd like to thank you all for taking time out at lunchtime, and I look forward to seeing you all again on the 17th of December. Goodbye.
Great. Thank you.